The situation in British Columbia has taken a dramatic turn, as 22 towers across the region have been flagged as unsafe to occupy. This has sparked immediate panic among residents, investors, and government officials alike. Vancouver, a city known for its soaring real estate prices and booming property market, is now facing an unprecedented crisis that threatens to dismantle the very foundation of its housing sector. The implications of this discovery extend far beyond just the affected buildings. This could mark the beginning of a collapse that reaches into every corner of the housing market, with far-reaching consequences that are still unfolding. The announcement has sent shockwaves through the community. Thousands of residents are suddenly faced with the terrifying reality that their homes are no longer safe to live in. Some have already received eviction notices, while others are left scrambling to find temporary accommodations. For many, this means more than just a temporary inconvenience. It's a financial nightmare. The market for rental properties is already under strain, with available units in high demand, making it nearly impossible for many to find affordable housing. The psychological toll of this crisis is immense, as families are uprooted from their homes without warning, their futures uncertain. This is not just a personal tragedy for those directly affected, it is also a blow to the broader real estate market in British Columbia. Vancouver's real estate prices have been among the highest in the world for years, and this new crisis threatens to drive those prices even lower. According to recent estimates, the value of the affected buildings could plunge by as much as 40%, with a ripple effect that is likely to be felt across the entire real estate market. This is a warning sign that the stability of the housing sector is at risk. As more buildings are inspected and flagged as unsafe, the extent of the problem is still unknown. But what is certain is that the damage is widespread and severe. For investors, this crisis is devastating. Those who have poured millions of dollars into these properties are now facing massive losses, as their investments are effectively rendered worthless. For many, this is not just a financial setback, it's a total collapse of their portfolio. Real estate in Vancouver has long been seen as a safe bet, with prices only ever seeming to rise. Now, that assumption is being called into question. The market that once seemed invincible is now showing signs of cracking, and the fallout could be far-reaching. The construction industry, too, is feeling the strain. Developers who had been counting on the continued growth of Vancouver's real estate market are now facing an uncertain future. Projects have been put on hold, and many developers are scrambling to salvage what they can. This has led to layoffs and financial instability within the industry, with many small contractors and subcontractors facing bankruptcy. The supply chain disruptions caused by this crisis are expected to exacerbate the already rising costs of construction, leading to further delays and escalating costs across the board. The impact on the banking sector is also profound. Mortgage lenders are being hit hard by the sudden rise in defaults, as homeowners and investors alike struggle to keep up with their payments. With properties rendered uninhabitable and their values plummeting, many homeowners are now in a position where they owe more on their mortgages than their properties are worth. This is known as negative equity, and it's a situation that could take years to resolve. As banks tighten their lending criteria and become more cautious about issuing new mortgages, the market for new buyers has all but dried up. Those who had been hoping to purchase a home in Vancouver are now faced with skyrocketing interest rates and an unstable housing market, making it nearly impossible for them to enter the market. The government's response to the crisis has been chaotic at best. Premier John Horgan's office was quick to release a statement calling for a full investigation into the cause of the structural issues, but the confusion and contradictory statements from government officials only added to the sense of panic. The Premier's lack of clear leadership in the face of such a massive crisis has only deepened public distrust in the government's ability to address the issue. As the days pass, more questions arise about how this crisis was allowed to spiral out of control. How could so many buildings, many of them only a few years old, be deemed unsafe? Was this a failure of oversight? Were regulations too lax? These are questions that remain unanswered, and the government's inability to provide clear, definitive answers has only fueled the growing sense of fear and uncertainty. For many residents, the uncertainty is the hardest part to bear. Without clear answers from the government, it is impossible to know what the future holds. Will these buildings be repaired? How long will it take? Will they ever be safe to live in again? These are questions that no one has answers to. The emotional toll of this crisis is immense, and for many, the fear of the unknown is just as crippling as the financial losses they are facing. This crisis is also exposing deep cracks in the city's housing policies. Vancouver has long struggled with an affordability crisis, with housing prices out of reach for many residents. Now, this new issue is adding another layer of complexity to the problem. Developers have been building high-rise towers to accommodate the growing population, but with so many of these buildings now deemed unsafe, it raises serious questions about the long-term viability of this strategy. Will Vancouver continue to rely on high-density construction to house its growing population, or will this crisis prompt a reevaluation of how the city should approach its housing needs? The answer is still unclear. But one thing is certain: the status quo is no longer sustainable. Meanwhile, the ripple effects are being felt across the province. The crisis in Vancouver's real estate market has already begun to affect surrounding areas, as potential buyers and renters look elsewhere for housing. As demand for properties in Vancouver plummets, prices in nearby cities and towns are beginning to rise. This could lead to a shift in the provincial housing market, with the effects of this crisis spreading far beyond the city's borders. For those living in these areas, this could mean rising property taxes, higher rents, and increased competition for limited housing stock. As the crisis continues to unfold, there are still many unknowns. The full extent of the damage to Vancouver's housing market remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: the situation is dire. The ripple effects of this crisis will be felt for years to come, and the fallout is likely to affect every aspect of life in British Columbia. Whether the government can respond effectively and restore confidence in the market remains to be seen. But for now, the people of British Columbia are left in the dark, unsure of what the future holds. As the crisis deepens, the call for action becomes louder. But will it be enough to prevent the collapse of Vancouver's once booming housing market? Only time will tell. The impact on the average person's life is profound. Not only are people losing their homes, but they are losing their sense of security and stability. The very foundation of what made Vancouver one of the most desirable cities to live in is now in question. Families are being torn apart, their savings wiped out, and their futures uncertain. As this crisis continues to unfold, the true human cost is becoming more apparent. This is not just a story about buildings falling apart, it is a story about lives being shattered. What happens next could change the face of Vancouver forever. The gravity of the situation in British Columbia's housing market continues to unfold, with new developments emerging every day that deepen the crisis. The economic implications are staggering, and the effects are spreading across the real estate, banking, and construction sectors like wildfire. As the dust settles, the question now is how far-reaching the consequences will be, and whether the province's leaders are prepared to tackle the disaster head-on, or whether their delays and contradictions will further exacerbate the damage. The real estate collapse triggered by the unsafe to occupy status of 22 towers is not just a financial setback. It's a wake-up call that exposes the frailties of Vancouver's housing policies. These towering apartment complexes, once seen as the pinnacle of modern city living, are now symbols of failed oversight and construction standards that have been sorely lacking in recent years. The question that is burning in the minds of residents and investors alike is, how could this have happened? How could so many newly built high-rises have been deemed unsafe? Were there underlying issues with the building practices? Was there a failure in the inspection processes? And most importantly, how many more buildings will be found to share the same fate? While the government and various officials scramble to provide answers, it's evident that this crisis has brought to light systemic flaws that go far beyond just a few unsafe buildings. The real risk is that this is the beginning of a much larger issue. As more buildings are inspected, there are growing concerns that the true extent of the problem is still being uncovered. What if this is the tip of the iceberg? What if the structural failures extend far beyond the 22 towers that have already been flagged? Experts are now speculating that Vancouver's housing market may be facing a full-scale collapse, one that could rival the economic downturns of the past century. The construction industry, once the backbone of British Columbia's booming economy, is now reeling. With several major developers already forced into bankruptcy and others struggling to salvage what's left of their projects, the future of housing development in Vancouver is unclear. The market for new construction is likely to take years to recover, and even then, it may be irreversibly altered. The cost of construction materials has skyrocketed due to the ongoing supply chain disruptions, further driving up the price of new housing. These price hikes will only exacerbate the affordability crisis that has plagued the province for years, leaving many without the option to buy homes in Vancouver. The dream of homeownership is becoming an unattainable goal for many British Columbians, while the fear of becoming trapped in unsafe buildings looms large for current residents. On top of the financial devastation, the human toll of this crisis is undeniable. The personal stories of people being forced to leave their homes, many of which were purchased with the hope of building a future in Vancouver, are heartbreaking. Families are struggling to find new places to live, often at great expense, and many are forced into temporary housing solutions as the government and insurance companies struggle to provide assistance. The emotional stress of this situation is compounded by the uncertainty of what comes next. For many people, their homes represented not only financial investments, but also a sense of security, a place where they could build their lives and futures. Now, that security has been shattered, and there is no clear path to rebuilding what has been lost. Meanwhile, the banks that once propped up the housing market are now facing mounting pressure. Mortgage defaults are climbing at an alarming rate as homeowners find themselves trapped in homes they can't sell or move out of. The risk of negative equity, where homeowners owe more on their mortgages than their properties are worth, is growing, and with it, the possibility of a cascade of foreclosures. The mortgage crisis, which many thought was a thing of the past, is now rearing its head once again, with devastating consequences. In addition, the bank's reluctance to issue new loans is making it even more difficult for first-time buyers to enter the market. The few who still manage to secure financing are facing skyrocketing interest rates, further adding to the financial burden. The province's government has come under intense scrutiny as its response to the crisis continues to fall short. Premier John Horgan's office has faced backlash from all sides for its slow response and lack of a clear plan. On multiple occasions, conflicting statements from government officials have only fueled confusion and doubt among the public. While the Premier has promised investigations and remedial measures, residents are left wondering whether they can trust the government to deliver. With elections looming, political opponents are using the crisis as a weapon, accusing the government of negligence and mismanagement. The Premier's failure to act swiftly and decisively has only added to the growing sense of distrust in the province's leadership. The lack of effective communication has left the public in a state of constant uncertainty. Every day that passes without a clear resolution adds to the frustration of Vancouver's residents. What happens next? Will the government step in with a comprehensive plan to resolve the situation, or will the crisis continue to spiral out of control? The stakes are high, and the clock is ticking. For those who have invested in Vancouver's real estate market, this is a time of reckoning. Real estate was once seen as a safe, almost foolproof investment. Property values always seemed to rise, and the idea of a market collapse seemed unimaginable. Now, that assumption has been shattered, and many investors are facing the harsh reality that their portfolios are on the verge of collapse. The uncertainty surrounding the future of Vancouver's real estate market has led to widespread panic among investors, with many rushing to offload their properties before the situation worsens. But with so many properties now flagged as unsafe, selling has become nearly impossible. The market for Vancouver real estate is frozen, and it's unclear when or if it will recover. For foreign investors, this crisis is particularly damaging. Many foreign nationals who have purchased property in Vancouver are now faced with the reality that their investments are worth far less than they originally paid for them. The plummeting value of these properties has left some investors with massive losses, while others are stuck with buildings they can no longer rent or sell. The foreign buyer ban, which was implemented in an attempt to cool Vancouver's overheated real estate market, has done little to mitigate the damage caused by this crisis. In fact, it has only exacerbated the problem, as foreign investors now see their investments unravel before their eyes. The province's housing crisis is now a political issue, one that could have lasting consequences for Premier Horgan and his government. As the fallout from the crisis continues to spread, more people are questioning the effectiveness of the government's housing policies. Will the Premier's office be able to regain public trust? Or will this crisis mark the beginning of the end of their political careers? The stakes are incredibly high, and the future of the provincial government may hang in the balance. As we continue to monitor this unfolding crisis, there are still many unanswered questions. How many more buildings will be flagged as unsafe? Will the government be able to provide adequate support for the thousands of affected residents? And most importantly, how will Vancouver's real estate market recover from this disaster? One thing is clear: the impact of this crisis will be felt for years to come, and its effects will reverberate across the province, altering the landscape of British Columbia's housing market forever. The time for action is now. If you want to stay informed on the latest developments and find out what happens next, be sure to subscribe to our channel and leave a comment with the word 1 to let us know your thoughts. Don't miss out on future updates on this unfolding crisis. Stay tuned as we continue to uncover new revelations and provide you with the most up-to-date information. This is a story you won't want to miss. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment 1, and subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with this unfolding crisis. Stay informed, stay ahead, and make sure you're prepared for what comes next.